Hey everybody, I'm Robert. Welcome down here to the channel. Welcome back to the studio. Today we've got an interesting one for you. We're going to cut right into it because we could probably go on about this for hours. I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. But once again, McLaren is making a mess. We've spoke before about their financial decisions, their pressing of more new products, new models, and really the same models with the same motors, business decisions that they've made, and maybe the fact that it would be a good idea to slow down a little bit and focus on quality and refining the product because they have such a tremendous base and the potential to build what I believe are the best cars in the world. But they were just missing a few key parts on the business side to make that all work. McLaren has slowed down a little bit. They've taken a look at what they're doing. They've come out with a new V6 hybrid car. They have put out the 765 LT, and that's a car that started out with a slow reception among owners and has all of a sudden taken off and been one of the most traded cars in the used supercar market as of recent, even beating out the likes of the 488 Pista in terms of desirability and the amount of time on average that the car is sitting on the market before it's sold in terms of aftermarket or secondhand sales. It's really interesting when a 765 LT goes faster than a 488 Pista. It really says something about the car. We're going to dissect what this is, why it is, and I think you guys know the main reason for this is a recent snafu between the VP of Marketing and Communications for McLaren North America and Brooks from DragTimes.com Instagram page regarding a video that he did with the McLaren Elva. Very interesting topic. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. What happened? Brooks got a hold of a McLaren Elva from one of the Southern Florida McLaren dealerships. He went out and did some maybe short videos with it, some runs with it, and he did some draggy tests with it where he used his standard speed meter, acceleration meter, quarter mile meter, and showed what the car was capable of. Within a couple hours, the video had close to 60,000 views. It was going really well. All of the comments were very positive. Everybody was over the moon about the car and thought, man, this is actually really cool that McLaren built this, and look at how damn fast it is. Somebody within the McLaren marketing or PR department didn't like it. They essentially contacted this Southern Florida McLaren dealer and said, you need to have Brooks take this down. This needs to come off of the Drag Times YouTube channel. We don't like this at all. We're not happy with this. Basically, Brooks wanting to protect his dealer and the family, if you would, his McLaren family, in a way. He took it down immediately. He took the video down, and all of a sudden the uproar started. Where'd the video go? What happened? Why is this video gone? And I've probably gotten about 60 DMs by now asking me what I know about it, asking me what my thoughts are about it. And yes, I'd seen it. I'd seen that the video went away. I didn't speak with Brooks directly about it because, yes, we're friends. He's come out to the Nürburgring. We've done laps in the 720 together. We actually raced the Pista in the 720 on the Autobahn together. You guys can see that video on his channel. In fact, a lot of his followers laughed at me because I was driving the Pista and thought how bad I must feel that the 720 got smoked by the Pista, not realizing that the 720 was also my car. And there was another run where I drove the 720 and beat the Pista. So we had a lot of fun together out at the Nürburgring. We'll link up when I'm back in Florida in the next couple weeks as well. And so we stay in touch on a lot of topics, and one of them is McLaren ownership. And yeah, so I did end up giving him a call, and I said, you know, Brooks, I want to make a video about this because this is something that's very dear to me. And the reason it's very dear to me is that I was in a position with McLaren where I was an owner, am an owner, and I was running the cars on the Nürburgring. And I was running the cars on the Nürburgring to the extent that people started contacting me and saying, Robert, tell me about what the car's like. Tell me about the problems it has. What is it like to drive? How does it compare to your Ferraris? How does it compare to your Porsches? How does it compare to the Lamborghinis? How does it compare to all these other cars that you encounter on the Nürburgring? And it got to the point where I could have probably spent a good 2 to 3 hours a day talking to the people that messaged me about McLaren and talking to me about what ownership is like and what the actual usage is like. Since then, I've amassed a list of people who have messaged me, screenshots that I take, and I put them in a shared photo stream on the Apple server of about 300 people who have confirmed and written to me, I bought this McLaren, a 720, a 570, a 600, all the way through Sennas, etc., because of the feedback that you gave, because of the use that you've had and the success that you've had with these cars on the Nürburgring, and just in general, the way that you've shared them and even promoted them indirectly by being an owner that was able to use the cars as they were intended, as they were built. We bought the car because of that. Now, where does that leave this situation with Brooks? Brooks essentially, as I said a moment ago, was in contact with his dealer. They had this McLaren Elva there. He took it out, he drove it, he did some performance tests, and somebody within McLaren did not like it. They had him take the video down. He did so, and immediately he got on the phone with Andy Thomas, who is the Vice President of Communications and Marketing. So that would mean PR and marketing. That's somebody that should understand the world that we live in. It should understand what's going on here at YouTube. He should understand what you guys expect out of a car, and he should also damn well understand the people that are watching the likes of Brooks' channel, my channel, maybe even Nadim in Northern California, who's running Senna, 720, 600 LT, now a 620R, all on local California tracks, even down Dakota sometimes, and a handful of other guys that I could sit here and listen to who may not be who he thinks Road and Track or Motortrend or one of these companies are. Brooks essentially called this CEO, or not, please forgive me, he called this VP, and he said, what's the problem? What is the problem with this video that I made? The draggy times were fantastic. The response was wonderful from the people. And the way that Brooks relayed it to me was, the answer was, you are not an automotive journalist. You are an owner with a YouTube channel. And that struck a bell to me, because I went on Google and I started Googling this gentleman, Andy. And first of all, I found his Instagram page, and his Instagram page is, a lot of family stuff and things like that. Perfectly fine. Keep your work separated from there. So there's no marketing there, which is okay. But I've also found a recent podcast with Road and Track, of all people. And he did a podcast with Road and Track about a 765 LT that was custom painted for Road and Track, which I think very few of us have seen and very few of us have heard about. Yet it was worth this VP's time to sit down for 45 plus minutes and talk with one of the chief editors of Road and Track to discuss this project. In 3 weeks, it has 1,300 views. There are 0 comments on it, and I have seen it nowhere other than buried deep down in a Google search regarding this person. Now, as the head of communications and marketing for McLaren of North America, I would like to think that one would understand that we're in a situation today where YouTube, where Instagram, where owners with a YouTube channel sell more cars than Road and Track probably does. They sell more cars than a lot of these people with podcasts and the typical, I'm going to go drive on the same road and I'm going to go and cruise up and down a canyon and just give you my bland opinion. These cars are being sold based on ownership relations with the car, ownership experiences with the car, and if that owner happens to have a YouTube channel that has 330,000 people on it, if my Instagram at the time when I got connected more with the McLaren marketing side had maybe 20 or 30,000 people on it, now it's at 40-something thousand. My YouTube channel really didn't even exist, and now it's getting close to 60,000. That is minuscule. If I have a list of people with 300 names on it that tell me they bought a car because of the work we did, how many do we think Brooks can claim by having over 300,000 viewers and racing these cars on the drag strip? And one thing I have to reiterate, or one thing I have to step back to, is this: supercar owners, not as a whole, but a very good number of them, buy cars based on numbers. Be that Nürburgring times, be that Nürburgring performance, or be that drag times. All out flat performance, 0 to 60, 0 to 100, 0 to 200, 0 to 300, and quarter mile times are selling cars. That's why you announce those times. That's why you present them. And when you get that car in the hands of somebody like Brooks, there are people that I guarantee you are going to buy that car because he went out and ran a sub 9 quarter mile in it. Now, it's really interesting because I think that most manufacturers understand this. I think that most people in marketing understand this, that people with a YouTube channel People with Instagram channels are probably going to be one of your best ways to reach a general public. People who will go in forums and communicate in forums. I remember back before, I haven't been so active lately, but I would write about what the comparisons between a 458 Italia and a 650S were driving them on the Nürburgring. And the people in the Ferrari forums and the McLaren forums loved to read that because I was giving a genuine feedback on how our car was to drive. And people trusted me because I wasn't a journalist. I wasn't a magazine that was trying to sell magazines. I wasn't maybe seen as if I was being paid by a manufacturer to get a car, to get a long-term loaner and do all these tests on it. I was actually putting my money where my mouth was, and I was comparing cars like Ferrari, McLaren, and Porsche side by side and giving my honest feedback about them. As that went on, I started doing more on Instagram and doing more on YouTube and different things like that, and more people followed it, and they trusted that input because it was from an owner standpoint. It was from the standpoint of somebody that had the experience with them. I knew what broke first. I knew how long the brake discs last on the track. I knew how much fuel they required. I knew how the tires lasted. I could tell you different aspects of each car, and people were able to benefit from that. Now, I ended up buying two 675 LTs, one coupe, which is orange with a roof scoop, and then one Spider, which is Mexico blue with the MSO paint with a decent amount of carbon fiber on it. And I would say neither of those cars were on the cheap spectrum. Both of those were probably on the higher end of how these McLarens were spec'd. I bought both of those cars knowing that there was going to be a Spider coming out. And of course, I have gotten to the point where I will get less than 50% of my investment on either of those cars within 3 and 4 years based on how the depreciation cycle has worked with the McLaren. With that being said, I'm the first to say that I love those cars. I love how they drive. I love how they perform. I love how they sound. I think they're phenomenal cars that don't hold value. And I think they don't hold value because of the fact that McLaren is pumping out new models, new generation, all with the same engine, but just a new model with a little bit different look and maybe a little bit more performance. So with that being said, I can tell you that I'm in contact with a lot of original 675 owners. I'm in several 675 groups, be it on WhatsApp, Facebook, and different forums that I'm in. And a lot of those 675 owners have opted out of buying a 765. And the reason that they opted out of buying a 765 was because they were tired of the depreciation. They were tired of worried about the kilometers on their car or the miles on their car because they knew that was only going to further depreciation. And most of those owners that I spoke with were very frustrated with the marketing and the branding of McLaren pumping out more and more cars, and the marketing team not saying you need to stop this, you're killing us. And the after sales side of it also not saying, gosh, you guys are killing our depreciations. Our owners are upset because they can't get anything back out of their cars. And a lot of people, including myself, didn't buy a 765 LT for these reasons. All of a sudden, the 765 was at a point where anybody could order that car. Anybody was able to go down to their local McLaren dealer and get on a slot. If you weren't able to, you were in some micro market that was an exception to the rule. I know of people in the United States, I know of people in Germany, France, the UK, that were able to go in, first-time buyers, and get a 765 LT. That would never happen with a 488 Pista. That would never happen with a GT3 RS even, or a GT2 RS. For a first-time buyer to be able to go in and get a car right off the bat from a McLaren dealer. All of a sudden, this was happening with the 765, and that was because return customers had just bought one or two 675s. They just bought a 720. They just bought a Senna. Then they bought an Elva. Then they bought this, and then they bought that, and then they're on the list for the Speedtail. Oh, and then they need to get their Senna GTR. And they just said, Robert, I'm tired of it. Because we have had a lot of candid conversations about this. I'm just tired of it. And all of a sudden, there's a 765 LT delivered down in Florida. And this car comes to Florida. And of course, the owner of that car, Brooks, is going to take that car to the drag strip and he's going to start running it. And he immediately starts pounding out fast times. When we start seeing this car getting in the low 9s and the high 8s, all of a sudden there's a hype built around this car. And you can immediately see in the resale market that these cars were starting to fly. Dealers that just had cars coming in were getting sold immediately. And all of a sudden, as you watched around the supercar community in the back channels of the buys and sells and people going and saying, hey, I have messages of people said, Robert, I'm thinking about buying this car. I said, buy it now because it's going to be gone. They messaged me back 10 minutes later. It just sold. The car was online for 15 minutes and it sold. This is not how McLarens trade. This is not how they operate. And McLaren needs to think that when somebody came out and said, you're not a journalist, you're just a YouTuber or you're just an owner with a YouTube channel, Sport Auto, who would be what we would consider an automotive journalist, they make magazine articles. Sport Auto came out with the car and they reported a slower Hockenheim ring time for the 765 than the 720, and they reported a slower Hockenheim ring time for the 620 than the 600 LT. A tier 1 journalist came out and put an article out that pretty much simmered down the hype of the 765 LT several months before the car was even available for owners. And so many people saw that article and said, what is wrong? I even said, you know what, maybe there was problems. Maybe they made the car too hyper, too low of a gear ratio, too edgy, almost like Ferrari makes their cars, and the car isn't actually as good as, say, the 675 was. When that happened, those opinion of the 765 definitely took a dip. But something brought that dip out. A true automotive journalist, tier 1 media, brought down the excitement of this car, and it took an owner with a YouTube channel to essentially turn that around and bring that excitement back. And that's exactly what Brooks did. And if you are the VP of anything, any industry that you're in, I don't care if it's the VP of toilet paper, you need to know that COVID requires toilet paper, you get into production. If you're the VP of communication and marketing, you need to understand that your owners, your sales are going through people like myself, people like Brooks, people who like Tim Burton who's buying these cars, anybody at all who is buying these cars that has channels. And no, I'm not comparing myself to Brooks or Tim Burton. I'm just giving an expanded view of all of the different markets. But you need to understand that that truly is your advertising program. If you can get the hands or our hands on these cars, and we're excited about them because we're going to share exactly how we feel. If we're truly excited about these cars, that will sell cars. The 620R could be one of McLaren's biggest marketing snafus that I can imagine. The 620R was produced, I knew about it about a year and a half before it was announced anywhere. I was excited for it. I knew I wanted one ASAP. So I got on board and I said, let's get one, let me have one of these. When the time came to order one, it was getting into the whole COVID swing up and everything was happening. And there was one that was produced that I could take immediately, and it was within 95% of the spec that I would have wanted anyways. So I said, let's go with this one. I'll take this car. The car was delivered at a very early point, and I was very fortunate to have this 620R as early as I did. I was able to enjoy it on the Nürburgring during COVID lockdowns, and I had an absolute blast with it. It probably was one of my most enjoyable time periods on the Nürburgring because I was focused on one car. I was doing setup changes to it. I was learning the car, and I wasn't worried about jumping from car to car, and I had an absolute blast with it. But I had people contact me, Robert, what is a 620R? This makes no sense. Is this a GT4 that you bought and then you made road legal? What's going on? And I started thinking, nobody even knows what this amazing car is, one of the most fun to drive cars that McLaren has built to date, and nobody knows what it is. McLaren put on a press day in the UK, and nobody could go to it. And this was probably a month and a half after I already had my car. By the time McLaren was able to put on a press day about the 620R, I'd already had Tim Burton, Shmee drive my car. I'd already had Christian from Sport Auto drive my car, and I'd had many other people reach out to me and ask if they could get their hands on my car because I had a car that was available before McLaren could even present it to journalists and let them use it and share their opinions of the car. I was telling people how to set up their car. I was telling them how it worked, what its quirks were, before McLaren could even have a journalist sitting in it. A car that McLaren's VP of marketing could have stepped up and shared with the right people and built some hype for because it was only going to be 350 cars. They could have sold this thing out like hotcakes. Instead, today, I get a message, well, a couple weeks ago, but we say today in the present sense. Today, there is a dealership that is using a 620R as a loaner car. If you come in and you get work done on your 720S, they're going to give you the keys to a 620R so that you can take it out, maybe grocery shopping to work for the day while your car's getting service. That's pretty sad when one of 350 limited cars is used as a loaner car for a dealership because, let's face it, they probably didn't have a buyer for it at that time. It really is a misstep, a miscommunication. There's so many things in this aspect that just don't work. There's so many things in marketing that these VP level executives that have worked for the past 30 or 40 years with newspaper print, with magazine print, that are missing the fact that times are changing. Journalists of yesterday are not the journalists of today. The people sharing the information about your cars today are absolutely not the people sharing the information of the cars yesterday. When an article comes out in Road and Track, look at the snafu between Motortrend and SSC that recently happened, where Motortrend stuck to their guns and said we were a bunch of dumb YouTubers because we saw that there was something wrong in this SSC video, and Motortrend stuck to their guns because they had a relationship with SSC. They had a relationship with the press agency that brought those two together, and they were stuck to it. They were going with it. We're at a day where I believe that auto journalists have a place and they can bring a lot to the table, but I do not think that this is a market that's going to remain for the next 20 years as it used to. And I think it's time that places like McLaren, like Ferrari, like Porsche, like Lamborghini, who cares, all the way down to Toyota, that's a time where they need to recognize this and need to understand that this is changing. We've seen many issues along the way. We know that the likes of the whole 25,000 pound Yaris deal, we know that there's flaws within this YouTube community, and we know that there's things that have to be done to regulate that and to keep it under control. But it is very important to understand that this is a legitimate market. It is a legitimate advertising avenue, and it is a place that a lot of cars are sold, a lot of watches are sold, a lot of Garnier spray tan is sold. Everything like that is sold from this relationship, this communication right here. I think that's really about all I have to say to it. I really hope that McLaren rethinks what they're doing. And maybe this is a centralized thing. I know a lot of people at McLaren, and I would really like to think that they wouldn't say you're just an owner with a YouTube channel. But at the same time, McLaren is the reason that you guys are all tier one. If it wasn't for McLaren deciding that I didn't need a 600 LT Spider after I've already had a 600 LT for how many months running it on the racetrack, and sold how many 600 LTs for them essentially through my positive reviews and my, ecstatic feedback about the front end feel, the playfulness of the chassis, etc., then maybe that is part of the philosophy of the brand. I hope they can prove us wrong. I hope that they can prove us that the love that we have for the brand is founded and has a good reason behind it. But at the same time, I hope that we can end up getting the respect that we deserve for sharing our positive relationships with cars and with car manufacturers and aftermarket brands with you guys, because I really do think that when we give a positive review or even an objective review, I'm the first that can tell you that a McLaren 620R has wonderful front-end feedback. It's faster than a 600 LT. You can carry it deeper into the corners because it's more stable under braking, but it eats up front tires and it wears the front brakes a little bit faster. I'm happy to tell you those things, but would I still buy a 620R because of those two items? I absolutely would. It's one of the most fun cars to drive that I've ever been in. The chassis, the feedback, the feel, the emotion that comes from it is phenomenal. It's really all I have to say, guys. We'll catch you later.